the northeast tip of North America, on an island called Newfoundland, there's a airport. It used to be one of the biggest airports in the world. And next to it is a town called Gander.
Every person that you see on stage in the show is either a real person or is a composite of a number of people.
Morning, Annette.
Morning, Beulah. How's the kids?
Not exactly thrilled to be inside on such a gorgeous day.
Everything that we have in there, is some version of what happened.
Everybody in this room has a story about how they started that day. Welcome to the Rock. If you come from away, you probably understand about a half of what we say.
I play Captain Beverly Bass.
Some of the planes are parked on a runway where the surface is all torn up. That debris...
She was the first female captain for American Airlines. She's this incredibly strong, beautiful pilot who was flying from Paris to Dallas on September 11th and was grounded in Gander, Newfoundland.
For each destination that we flew together.
What's so beautiful about Come From Away is that it is truly an ensemble piece. There are 12 actors and basically 12 chairs, and we are representing thousands of people, and so we have to do it together. We're switching in and out of character seamlessly.
I really wanted the show to just turn on a dime and turn on a dime again. So the actors have to hold infinite different configurations and people and physical relationships in their head so that they can be in one moment, turn, and be in another completely different moment.
And I am back in the airport by Thursday.
Everybody plays 60 to 70 different characters. So they're flipping in and out of New York and Dallas and France and Gander accents. So the actors have to have this rock solid understanding of their own language and their own dialect.
That is the story and some scenes from this new Broadway play. It's actually right now airing in Toronto, or being shown in Toronto. It's moving on its way to Broadway, called Come From Away. We are all aware of how drastically the world changed on September 11, 2001, when the largest terrorist attack to happen on American soil happened. But very few people know of what also happened that day in a little town named Gander in Newfoundland. I'm joined by Salvation Army Colonel Alf Richardson, who headed up the Salvation Army head office in Gander in 2001. Welcome, Colonel Richardson.
Thank you very much.
It was a crazy day.
It was an interesting day, yes.
Take us back. You were having lunch with some of your staff members when you looked up at the television screen.
Yeah, we were just enjoying a birthday lunch.
Yeah.
And there was a television screen, as there often is in many of these restaurants, no sound, but you could see the picture. And I kept seeing this plane going into this tower. And I can recall saying to someone, I don't know what that movie is. I haven't seen that before, but it stuck and it keeps repeating. And then very quickly, my assistant came in and said, that's real. And we need to be on the alert.
Wow. Thousands descended on Gander. I have here 38 jetliners and 6,500 passengers were diverted and moved into this small town. How many people lived in Gander at that time?
Probably 8,000.
Wow. So essentially
almost
you doubled your population in one day.
Certainly did.
And what I love about this story and what they're capturing in Come From Away is the fact that this small community came around and loved these strangers.
Right.
Tell us what happened.
And you need to recognize that the small community actually expanded because a lot of the individuals got hosted in nearby towns as well.
Yes.
They were 24 hours on the plane, the majority of them, before they got off.
Wow.
And at that time, they had nothing to eat on the plane. You can be prepared for a disaster, but who could be prepared for something of this magnitude? Right. And so very quickly, my public relations man went to get involved in the planning committee, and we got called in for our services. And my wife actually stayed up all night in our office to just be available if something came and called. And then the next day, about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, they'd started to unload people, and I got a call from City Hall and said, Major Alf, we need 3,000 meals by 6 o'clock tonight. Can you handle that?
3,000 meals.
3,000 meals.
Wow.
And in a town like Gander.
You're like, yeah, I'll get into my kitchen and start right away.
Exactly, yeah. You realize in Gander, of course, it's a small community. There's no major big kitchen you can command and take over.
Yeah.
And so what do we do? What do we do? And I managed to come across 4 or 5 new cell phones. And I took some volunteers and a couple of my staff and put them in our boardroom. And I took the numbers with me and went to the local community cable station and just went on and made an appeal. If you've got a casserole you can send or a pot of stew or anything like that, call one of these numbers and they'll tell you where to take it. Because at that time, people were being deployed to various places within the community. Some were in schools, some were in churches, and that sort of thing for that first day. And the great thing about it, you have to know Newfoundlanders, you have to live there and experience their hospitality. I went back on television station at 20 minutes to 6,
Yeah.
and I only needed 300 more meals.
Wow.
And by 6 o'clock, we had everything we needed sorted out where it was, and that sort of began our saga for the next week or so.
I love these stories of how the church just rises to the occasion.
Right.
And the community rises to the
yes,
occasion
yes.
as well and just welcomes people. The churches were opening their doors. People were sleeping in pews, community centers. Tell us about it. People were sleeping everywhere they possibly could, living with families. People were opening their doors.
People opening the doors, yes. A lot of people were taking people in for showers and families. In fact, one story was a town of Gambo, which was probably a half-an-hour drive east of Gander. And the Salvation Army was one of the churches there that actually had people staying and sleeping on the pews. Wow. And I think Jill Briscoe stayed in that particular setting. But there was a married couple who were actually on their honeymoon.
Oh, my goodness.
And the last place they needed to be was in a church, sleeping on a pew with all those kind of other people. So the enterprising corps officer found a lovely little cottage not far out of town and made that available to them, and they began to look after them. So they were given their opportunity to enjoy their honeymoon together.
Wow. As the world was, in disarray, and literally miles away in New York, we're seeing towers falling. This little town was able to take in these people from these diverted jetliners and these diverted flights. I love the story of the phones that you told me about.
Yes.
Tell me,
Amazing.
tell us the
And
story.
everybody began to do what they could. Next door to our church was the telephone company.
Yeah.
And within a day, they had set some tables up, brought out all of the equipment. There were probably 20 telephones there. And as the people came off the planes, they were given the opportunity to make a free call anywhere in the world just to let your family know that you're well and connected, and began to go.
Tell us about the relationships as well, because there is still, how many years later, so many relationships that were birthed on that day and continue.
A lot of people have everlasting friends,
Yeah.
and they make contact. The second load of people that deplaned, the second people that deplaned off a jet, actually ended up at the Salvation Army's camp, which was about a half an hour out of Gander. And we had our man there who was looking after the camp. And a couple of years later, I was down again after I'd left Gander doing something, and went out to see him at the camp. And it happened to be September the 11th.
Wow.
And he said, we're going to get a phone call. What do you mean we're going to get a phone call? And one particular man calls him every year on September the 11th from the UK. And they chat and keep that acquaintance together. And that's carrying on. And of course, a lot of the thank yous that came to various communities and to various organizations are a lasting reminder of what took place on that particular occasion, and also a lasting means of connection between the passengers on the planes and the people of Gander and area.
You mentioned that there was a beam that was transported from New York to Gander as a thank you note, from those that were affected on this day.
That only happened this year.
Yes.
That happened this year, and was led in by motorcycle.
Yeah.
People drove motorcycles all the way from New York and followed and led it in. And it was a great picture to see. I wasn't there, but...
as a great thank you note.
Yes, yes.
What do you think about this musical and the fact that they've taken what was, again, I definitely put Gander on the map.
Oh, yeah.
And now it's putting Gander on the
again,
Broadway map as well.
Exactly,
What do you think about
I think
this?
it's exciting. I haven't seen it yet,
Yeah.
but I have a hint that I'm getting some tickets for Christmas, so that might make it possible for me to go in to see that. But it's going to be exciting. I've had some friends who've seen it, and they say it's an amazing musical, and again, puts Gander on the map. And it's great that the mayor, who was the mayor on 9/11, is still in office.
Wow.
And he was there at the opening in Toronto of the musical there. And it's also great that the first performance was in the Gander, the very complex where we had our food warehouse. That's where the opening musicale was.
Wow. The world's largest refrigerator, is
Yes,
this what you're
the world's
talking
largest
about?
refrigerator. Yes, I think that's where. Right next door to that was is the theater where they had the opening production of that for the people of Gander.
And just to put some context, basically it was an ice rink that you turned into a refrigerator to keep all the food refrigerated for all of these thousands of people.
Exactly. Next door to our headquarters in our church in Gander, the city built a great ice rink complex. And actually it had been dedicated about 6 months earlier by the sitting general of the Salvation Army, who was there for some services. And everyone joined us and filled it up. And during the service that evening, the mayor of Gander allowed the general to dedicate that particular ice rink. So it was next door. All of a sudden, after the initial meal, you can't keep asking people to bring potluck every day for a week. We started to gather food, and we became responsible for food distribution. And so we took that ice rink initially as a storage room to sort out food, and people were staying all the way in various places. They would phone every day and tell us, this is what's on our menu today, supply us food. And we would make sure that it got there, or the order got ready and they would pick it up. Then we started getting things that needed to be kept refrigerated. How are we going to manage this? So I gave a call to City Hall and said, I think I need the ice. And very quickly they were over with plywood, put it on the ice, and people brought stuff, and it kept well.
Wow. As you look back on that day, what do you think? Everybody got back on their planes and everybody said goodbye, and Gander went back to being normal. We only have a few seconds left. What did you think of everything that had happened for that time?
Again, it just reintegrated my faith in people, my faith in God, and the fact that Gander is a very religious community. Newfoundlanders really worship God, and they talk about God, and they're not afraid to share their faith. And that all came evident in everything it did, and just a oneness, a community coming together. No matter what our faith was, no matter what church we belonged to, we were one, meeting the need that Jesus told us to meet in Matthew's gospel. Inasmuch as you've done to the least of these, my brethren, you've done it unto me.
You have. Thank you, Colonel.
You're welcome.